Hi, and thank you so much for inviting us. My name is Anna Sander, and this is Josephine Appelqvist, and we are the founders of the organization Talita. And Talita is a faith-based organization, and we run shelters with rehabilitation program in Sweden and in 5 other countries. And it's for women and children, if we talk about abroad, that wants to leave prostitution, pornography, and human trafficking. Today, we're going to talk about the Nordic model. In 1999, the Sex Purchase Act was adopted in Sweden. And the introduction of the law did not happen overnight. It preceded by 30 years of research. And what they saw was that the person who suffers in prostitution is the seller. And that is most of the time a woman. And the man uses her as a commodity. And this is completely unacceptable in an equal society. So when we got the law in Sweden, we expected the government to launch an exit program for women in prostitution. But this never happened. We were so disappointed, and we felt that we had to do something. And that is the main reason why we started Talita. The original idea with the introduction of the law was to increase the agency of the seller and to equalize the power balance, to reduce the exploitation of individuals, and to reduce demand. The law is also meant to encourage individuals to seek help in order to leave prostitution, as they can be safe in the knowledge that there will be no criminal consequences of having been involved in the industry.
Yeah, and I think we can go on to slide number 3. We're going to talk about the benefits of the Nordic model today. But first, we're going to show you our main resources of information. First, we have a governmental evaluation of the law that was made in 2010. Unfortunately, I don't think we have that in English, but it's in Swedish. And then we have a report, a follow-up of the application of the law made by the Swedish National Council for Crime Prevention. We will also base this presentation on information from a recent annual report from the Swedish National Police Authority, and also one of the reports from the Swedish Gender Equality Agency, one of their reports on prostitution. And since the legislation in Sweden went into force in 1999, the prostitution market has become global, diversified, and virtual. And it's problematic to assess prostitution in numbers, since statistics are difficult to compare, as different studies have categorized groups differently. For example, in some studies, young people as a group is defined as people between the age 15 to 30. And in other studies, this age span is different. But what we do know for sure is that street prostitution has declined in Sweden by more than 50%. And but also at the same time, we have to remember that just like in other countries, accessibility has increased due to the internet.
Now we can take the next slide. So what are the benefits of the legislation? Well, first of all, the sex buyers are being pushed back. And we know from experience that when the buyers risk punishment, the number of men who buy women in prostitution decrease. And the local prostitution markets become less lucrative. And traffickers will then choose other and more profitable destinations. We've also seen that trafficking in women for prostitution into Sweden has decreased. Since the woman is not criminalized, she is not afraid of the police, and she can talk to them about pimps and traffickers freely and help the police track them down. And the traffickers, who are pragmatic business people, don't want to go through the hassle of setting up activities in Sweden, where it's more dangerous for them. Instead, they bring the women to other countries such as Holland or Germany, where the climate is friendlier for them and prostitution is legalized. And according to the police, the Sex Purchase Act is one of the most important tools in fighting organized crime. It leads them to the trafficking networks because when they go after the buyers, they automatically find the traffickers. And since the girl is not criminalized, she dares to talk to the police about the buyers and the pimps. In addition, they find a lot of information in the sex buyers and the women's mobile phones. Also, buying sex is considered something shameful in Sweden. This is actually one of the most shameful crimes that you can be arrested for in Sweden, and the media coverage is extensive.
And the next slide, we continue with the benefits of the legislation. A law that prohibits the purchase of sexual services has a normative effect. It questions the idea that men should be able to express their sexuality in any form and at any time. And in Sweden, we say that full gender equality cannot be brought about as long as a subclass of women is used and exploited in prostitution. Before the law, 70% of the Swedes were against it, right before the law was passed in our parliament. After the law had been introduced, 70% was in favor of it. And it had a huge effect on how people in Sweden started to think about prostitution. And this is something that we especially can read about in the evaluation of the law from 2010. The next one, the amount of violence decreases in a country with a Nordic model. Some people claim that our law makes it more dangerous for women, and we say that it's the opposite. The legislation that we have puts all the pressure on the sex buyers. Since what they do is illegal, they know that the police is only a phone call away if they behave badly. We have not had a single woman in prostitution in Sweden murdered since 1987. And this can be compared to Germany, for example, where prostitution is legal. They have had more than 100 murders of women in prostitution during the same time period. Also, it makes it easier for the police to find prostitution. Some claim that prostitution will go underground with the Nordic model and that the police will not be able to trace it. But the police doesn't say this in Sweden. No one says that it's a problem to find the prostitution. The legislation makes it easy for the police to track down where prostitution is going on. Because if the sex buyers can find the women, so can the police, social workers, and NGOs. It's not difficult. NGOs and social workers can also offer women in prostitution help due to the Nordic model. Because there is help in form of exit programs for women in a country that has the Nordic model. Sometimes it's not enough, the help is not enough, but at least there's an awareness that help is needed. In countries where both buying and selling are criminalized, women are considered criminals, and many of them end up in jail. And that is something we see in countries like Kenya and Mongolia, where we also have Talita. In countries where both buying and selling is legal, then prostitution is considered a job, and you don't need any exit programs for a job. So if you see prostitution as sex work, then there will be no help for the women. Of course not. So this is also a benefit with the Nordic model, that you can actually offer the women help. And I also want to say, it's the next slide, that we have something called KAST in Sweden. It's a government-funded clinic for men who wants to stop purchasing sex. It's important that we have this possibility for men to go to the center and receive psychosocial supportive counseling.
And we can go to the next slide. Well, even if Sweden was the first country to adopt this law, many other countries has followed with the same or a similar law. When Sweden introduced its legislation back in 1999, many actually laughed at us, thinking we were out of our minds. But today, several countries have introduced a similar legislation. Among them, Northern Ireland, France, Norway, Israel, Canada, and also actually the state of Maine in the US. Next slide, please. Here you can see 3 equally important actors in Sweden. When the law came, the police got the opportunity to work in a totally new way. The city police's prostitution unit began arresting sex buyers and spoke to the women, offering them help. The police gained valuable knowledge through the trust they built. After a few years, a representative from social services started to go with the police, together with them. And in 2013, the police and the social services reached out to Talita, and it became a very successful model. And I would like to tell you how the police, social workers, and Talita work. And it often starts with the police, that they are looking at escort sites at the internet, and they're especially trying to find ads where it looks like the girl is very, very young, a minor, or if they can see that she's very vulnerable, that she might be trafficked. They look for small signs to try to focus on those. After they have done that, they try to get in contact with the woman or the girl. They contact her, they call her, or send a text message, and the woman, she answers, or sometimes it's a pimp that answers and writes back. But that doesn't really matter, because what's important is that the police, who is pretending to be a sex buyer, actually get in contact with the woman, and they decide where to meet, how much it will cost, and the police gets an address, and that's the goal. So later on that night, at the time they have decided, the police, together with the social worker, go to the hotel or the apartment, they knock at the door, and when the woman opens the door, they immediately show that they are from the police or that they are a social worker. And the police, if there's a sex buyer around, they will, of course, take him because he's a criminal. And the social workers, they will start to talk to the woman. They will tell her that there is help if they are interested. And sometimes the girl says right away that she wants help to leave prostitution. Sometimes she's really scared and she doesn't dare to say that she wants to get out because maybe she's afraid of a pimp or a trafficker. But if she says that she wants help, they can either call us and say that, could you please come immediately to this address or to this hotel and talk to this girl? And sometimes we go there, we talk to her and take her with us right away to one of our shelters. At other times, the police and social workers take the girl into the police car or the social worker's car, and they drive her to the shelter where she can meet us. And this is usually actually how it works when new girls come to Talita, and how the police and social workers come about this. And I also would like to say that we carry an emergency phone 24/7, because the police and social worker, they don't work office hours. They work during evenings, weekends, and nights. So it's really important to be available for their phone calls at any time. Thank you so much for listening to us. And I hope that you have found what we have talked about interesting. And yeah, that it's been something new that we have said.
Thank you.